Hello and welcome back to Analysis, where we've been discussing yesterday's Ofsted report on Birmingham Schools, in which 5 schools were placed under special measures, not on the grounds of their teaching quality, but because they deemed their pupils to be vulnerable to Islamic extremist ideas. So in this part of the programme, we'll be talking more about the wider issues surrounding the place of religion in British schools. Will this verdict change the way that religion is taught and practised in state education? And how will it affect communities where a large number of students belong to a faith group? What will it mean for other types of schools, such as faith schools and academies? Joining me in the studio is Gus John, Honorary Fellow and Associate Professor at the Institute of Education, Paul Pettinger from the Accord Coalition, and on the phone we're joined by Bilal Bilali, the spokesman for the Old No Academy in Birmingham, one of the schools placed under special measures. Welcome to you all. Before we start with the debate, though, let's hear what Home Secretary Theresa May had to say yesterday.
The event strategy we inherited was deeply flawed. It confused government policy to promote integration with government policy to prevent terrorism. It failed to tackle the extremist ideology that undermines the cohesion of our society and inspires would-be terrorists to murder. Ministers and officials sometimes engaged with, and therefore lent legitimacy to, organisations and people with extremist agendas. Unlike the old strategy, this government's prevent strategy recognises and tackles the danger of non-violent extremism as well as violent extremism.
Well, Bilali, let me start with you. I mean, nobody likes to be put under special measures. What is it you're most worried about now? What will happen to the Old No Academy, do you think?
Just so I can clarify first, please. I'm not a spokesman for Old No Academy per se. I'm a spokesman, appointed spokesman for the Parents Association alone of Old No Academy.
OK, thanks for that correction.
No worries at all. Now, I mean, our concern is, why would you place such a successful school, such a school with outstanding results, a school that only last year Ofsted deemed to be outstanding, into special measures? Why is it that for the same activities for which they were applauded for last year and praised for last year are now used as a baseball bat by which they want to batter the school and its management with? There seems to be clear hypocrisy, clear double standards that have been applied to the school. Michael Gove's own comments at the start of this investigation, which he said Ofsted need to throw the book out, is deeply worrying and concerning, because what it tells us that we're not going to play it fair anymore. We're not going to play it by the books. We're just going to go in with a hammer, a baseball bat, and smash what we want to smash. And those are not British values.
But what can you tell us what you think will now happen to the school? Obviously, you've made it clear you don't like what's has been done. But as a parent with children in the school, what do you think is going to happen to that school?
My worry is that this successful leadership and this very successful governing body which we've had over the past few years are going to be replaced with God knows who. I mean, previously this was one of the failing schools in Birmingham, and it was actually bringing the national average down. And my worry is that we might end up regressing and going back to those days again, and that'll be a very, very dark time for us.
But aren't some of the accusations in the Ofsted report about your school correct, that they banned the raffles and tombolas at events, that the group went to Saudi Arabia and obviously anybody who wasn't Muslim couldn't go? There was some banning of a Christian misassembly, I think. I mean, is that true or not true, any of that?
No, I mean, some of these allegations have been laced and exaggerated, and certain bits of information have been added on to make it a bad story. When in actual fact, it's probably quite innocent. I mean, the issue. I mean, let's look at the raffles. We have a problem in this country, like it or not, with gambling. There is a serious gambling problem, and unfortunately, it's plaguing the Muslim community as well. Raffles, I know some people may say it as innocent, but it's a step in that direction. So, I mean, I wouldn't allow my daughter to enter a raffle. I don't like the concept of gambling. The parents share this view. It's only right, therefore, that the school adheres to our wishes. The other allegations that have been thrown against us is the chanting, anti-Christian chanting. The school investigated it, proved to be wrong. There was an allegation in Ofsted report that the acting head had Second Faith Assembly. Now, his assemblies are printed in the newsletter, and they're all about citizenship and about good character and about telling the truth, not faith-based. This report is laced with a lot of inaccuracies, and it's unfortunate that it's been published without checking the evidence, and basically it lies in the report.
Well, thank you very much. But Paul Pettinger, let me come to you now. I mean, one of the allegations in the Ofsted report was that pupils, it said, were at risk of cultural isolation. Well, if you've got a school that's 98% one group of people, that's almost inevitable. I mean, how can you get around that? I mean, you can't suddenly just change the composition of the school pupils like that.
Sure. I am concerned about the overall tone of the debate, particularly how it's been set from central government. I think it's been completely inappropriate that the Department for Education has decided to employ a former terrorist and security chief to lead the investigation. I think that is totally inappropriate and unhelpful in trying to consider the issues that are at play here. On the flip side, I do think Ofsted have found a range of things that should be of concern. So I think it's perfectly understandable that a school will reflect aspects of the profile of its pupils and parents. On the flip side, however, Ofsted found that the school had organised school trips where not everyone at the school could attend, which I think for a community school is inappropriate. Ofsted, in its report, also cited reports from teachers who felt that the school was not providing a true reflection of its practices when Ofsted was there. So I certainly think Ofsted have found some real issues of concern, but I think the debate has to be kept in a much broader context. And actually, I think the government have been very unhelpful in the way that they have tried to explore these issues.
And Gus, John, can I ask you also the same sort of point, really? I mean, one of the accusations against the schools were that they insufficiently developed pupils' understanding of the different customs, traditions and religions of the UK. Now, what happens in a school in a small town in a rural shire of Britain where all the children are either Christian or of human, non-religious background at all? How do they learn about other faiths? I mean, couldn't this accusation be made against many, many schools in Britain?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And I would say the same about cultural isolation. Two-thirds of Britain is culturally isolated, and there's a kind of monoculturalism that most children grow up with, at least until they get to university. So it's all the arguments that are being made by the government, it has not applied to the generality. If we talk about extremism, my community has been campaigning for years about what is actually taught about the far-right ideologies of the National Front, the English Defence League, the British National Party, and so on. That's pretty fundamentalist. It's pretty extremist. Members of those organizations, over the years, have murdered black people for no other reason than that they're black. Now, the government might choose not to call that terrorism, but our communities feel terrorized by those people, and we have our dead to show for it. So there's a huge amount of hypocrisy and demonizing of Muslim communities because of what happened in 7/7 and so on. So to suggest that all Muslim children are somehow susceptible to radicalization, to extremist thought that might lead to radicalization, I think is placing a burden upon those children, which is completely unfair and unwarranted. And that is the problem.
And the government is sort of pushing this multicultural agenda, but starting with Islamic schools or schools where largely the people are Muslim, when they should be doing it perhaps all over the country.
Well, indeed, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the government has never taken a position, as far as I'm concerned, on white, right-wing, neo-fascist extremists in this country. And when they want when they gather and want to march through our communities, etc., and we organize ourselves to prevent them, then we find the police coming in and, guarding them and preserving the right to be able to march through our communities and so forth.
And Paul, what about, the whole issue of faith schools? Part of the excitement over the Birmingham schools is that they're non-faith schools, and people said, how can they be teaching faith in a non-faith school? But there are many faith schools. Are we satisfied that they are producing, teaching people about multiculturalism and respect for other religions and other faiths and so on?
I think that's an excellent point. I think the public debate is not being consistent. I was educated at a long succession of Church of England schools. The only religion I was taught was Christianity. So actually, I think we can apply a whole range of the arguments that are being thrown at the schools in Birmingham at the wider school system, the wider state-funded school system in our country.
Bilali, you're still there, I hope. Bilali, are you still with us?
I am, yes.
Yes, OK. Given that 98% of the kids in most of the schools in Birmingham that have been mentioned in this Ofsted report happen to be Muslims, do you think that there is a problem that needs to be addressed in the sense that would it be better if these schools were more integrated, less segregated, and had a wider representation of different communities in them? Or do you think it doesn't really matter?
Before I answer that point, going back to the Saudi point, last year when Ofsted came, they actually praised the Saudi trip. The Saudi trip, Arabic is taught in the school as one of the languages, and the Saudi trip was to help that enhancement of that language. Now, if they went to Spain or France, no one would back an Ireland, but because it's Saudi, it's like all of a sudden, oh, hold on, it's Islam, it must be extremism. Michael Gove himself, it's a secular school, it's not, it's a non-faith school, but Michael Gove sends Bibles to secular schools, to non-faith schools in the UK, and no one's made an issue about that. And right-wing fascism, I attended a Prevent programme that the school had invited me to attend, along with, obviously, counter-terrorism police who were presenting it. And the actual videos that were shown didn't deal with right-wing extremism, although they themselves spoke about it. The video, the presentation, didn't explore it at all. With regards to your question, the schools will have to reflect the communities that they're in. This is the world that we live in. So I don't think it is a major issue. We live in Britain. We've got various different types of cultures. Professor Gus gave an excellent example with regards to a rural village in Wales in which they won't have any interaction with other people. Here's 2/3 of the country don't have interaction with the non-whites. So I don't think it is an issue. No, I think the main issue here is that as a community we do feel that we are being targeted by this government.
Well, Gus John, I believe there was a time, when the black community, there were schools that were almost entirely black, and the efforts were made to integrate them.
Yes.
Has that been successful, or is that?
Well, no, it wasn't successful. There were two periods. Very quickly, we campaigned in the late 1960s against boroughs here in London busing children from their neighborhoods into mainly white neighborhoods because they didn't want more than 30% of black children in any one school. That practice was endorsed by the Department for Education.
Conservative at that time or Labour?
It really didn't matter, and I don't think it matters today, because on these issues, there's not much to choose between them. But the point I'm making is this. Why were they doing this? They were doing it because they felt that if you had an over-concentration of black children, African, Caribbean, or whatever, in these schools, it would somehow or other dumb down the aspirations and the outcomes of white children. Completely racist. And it fed into all of these eugenics theories people had.
So it wasn't this multicultural stuff that they're talking about now, then?
No, and then, of course, you will know that after the 2001 disturbances in Bradford and Leeds and Oldham, the government appointed Ted Cantle, and they had the community cohesion agenda and so forth, and they tried to mix schools, both in Bradford and in Oldham. That has not been particularly successful. And why hasn't it been successful? Because schools are organic places, all right? Okay, I know people send children off to boarding schools and all those sorts of things. But generally, they are community centers of learning. And some of them are centers of learning not just for children, but for families, family-centered learning. So therefore, if you have a neighborhood that is predominantly Caribbean or predominantly Asian, you would find schools with that catchment. Why should you assume that somehow those schools would be of an inferior quality to anything else? There are hundreds of schools in this country.
Well, I think the argument would be not about the quality of the teaching, but this multicultural issue, which they are making a big thing of in this Ofsted report.
Yes, but here again, you see, if you are going to compel, at least by implication or by inference, schools in Birmingham with a mainly Muslim population to have an understanding of the rest of Britain and all the rest of it and be truly multicultural, then you should demand that of everybody. Is the point you were making earlier about these rural areas and...
Well, is multiculturalism one of these British values that Michael Gove wants to push? I mean, what are these British values?
I'm not entirely clear of his agenda because at times it appears incoherent. Although we're touching upon a number of issues here. Actually, in Oldham, there are schools that are in areas that are mixed and are actually in the town that have a very white profile and other schools that have a very high proportion of Asian pupils that don't reflect the residential segregation in the town, which is a particular concern. Now, there, of course, are lots and lots of schools in the country that merely reflect the existing residential segregation in the area, and that just reflects real life and isn't. I don't think isn't an issue. What I do have issue with, and I will actually defend some aspects of the Ofsted report, insofar as it did find a number of issues that are of great concern. So, for example, it referred to the school trip, to the Saudi school trip that Ofsted said was not open to all pupils in the school, which arguably, if that had happened in a state-funded faith school, wouldn't have been allowed. There is also the issue about gender segregation.
Sorry to interrupt you.
That would have happened. So there are, I think, real issues here. Also, to keep in perspective, that wouldn't even be allowed in a faith school, including gender. Although, of course, on the flip side, we have lots and lots of single-sex schools anyway.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We've only got about 2 minutes left. I just wanted to get back to this British values thing. What do you think is the definition of British values that a school should be teaching?
Well, it's an interesting debate. I know that the Department for Education actually has published guidance in last autumn, in fact, for independent schools, where it tried to set out what it thought British values were, and it included trying to that schools should promote tolerance, democracy, respect for others. So the Department for Education has defined what those are. However, I'm not sure that they themselves are fully pursuing them in their own policies.
Well, Bilali, what is your definition of British values?
I mean, it's interesting to listen to the definitions there because they weren't applied at all by Gove and Theresa May. You know, my understanding of British values is it's tolerance. I think one thing throughout history the Brits have been known for is to be tolerant towards others, and this is why they were able to live in various countries all around the world and to have their massive empire. But now all of a sudden we seem to be changing away from it. If you look at the Ofsted report, what it said about the Oldham School, it praised the character of the people, saying that they're honest, that they're polite, respectful. These are British values. If only Michael Gove could take a leaf out of their book.
And Gus, John, what is your definition of British values?
Well, I can tell you what my division of values are. They're the same as other contributors have said. What I don't know is what makes them peculiarly British. Respect for law, respect for one another, tolerance of other people, a commitment to justice, all of those sorts of things are pretty universal. Okay, there are some countries that might want to throw them out of the window. But in general terms, liberal democracies all subscribe to them. What makes them particularly British, I'm not quite sure. And I believe that the stressing of British values is one way of government saying, this is us and you are there. Is that process of othering, you know? So you're not really a part of us. David Cameron said when he was introducing this business about no notice for inspections, that we will not give them the opportunity to hide the kinds of things that they do which have no place in our society. Well, whose society? Is it not the society of the Muslims as well? All of those children in Bilal's school and all the other schools in Birmingham and Bradford, etc. The language is laden with racism.
Well, I think on that tough note, we're going to have to end the programme. We've come to the close. So I'd just like to thank my guests, Bilal Bilali, Gus John and Paul Pettinger, and of course you at home for watching. And to continue the debate, do follow us on Twitter or Facebook at the link below. Thank you and goodbye.